Now, I'll introduce my guest to you. We're joined by the former Finance Minister, Mr. Seth Terkper. Good afternoon to you and welcome to Good Afternoon, Ghana.
Yeah, good afternoon and good afternoon to your viewers.
Great. You're going to do a brief presentation on the budget, but I just wanted, in maybe 1 minute, to give us a summary of what we should expect. We are all excited about this presentation or interaction that I'm going to have with you. I know you prefer that.
Yes.
Yes. So it's going to be an interaction between myself and you, but in summary, what are the key points that we should be looking at?
Yeah, thank you very much. The initial thoughts is about candidness, and I've been using the word. And often people say you cannot compare COVID to previous crises that we have had. But in similar vein, you cannot also blame COVID for everything, when we know very well. And I heard a deputy minister, now designate, mention that but for the good record, we wouldn't have had 1 billion. No, it is because there was a fiscal gap. And the loan from the IMF has the name RCF. They call it COVID loan, but its real name is RCF, okay. Rapid Credit Facility. And it is not because Ghana is performing in a stellar manner that there are no conditions. That is a feature of that loan. So it is used, for example, for countries that have crises like conflict, flood. The closest I can compare is our stabilization or contingency fund, which we wanted to, which we started to establish, so that in the event of a flood, in the event of, say, in the north, Kwame Nkrumah circle, and that is where it has minimal conditions. But it's not because, Ghana. The other point of candidness is the attempt to put almost everything on COVID. In fact, there was a 6 to 7 percentage point gap in the budget by the media review. Mm-hmm. And we would have the opportunity to look at it.
Definitely.
And this point is important, so maybe I will spend just a few seconds on it, and then we can go back to it.
Okay.
2020 began with a deficit of 4.7%. That was a projected deficit. By the time we were doing the media review, the deficit was increasing to 11% if you add bailout costs. It ended up at about 13%. That's what the media review translates into. Then followed, around the same time you had COVID. So we went to the fund for the RCF, which we are talking about now.
Okay.
And we gave government gave the fund, or they work together, the fund works with countries, a fiscal gap of 2.5% or so, 2%, on account of COVID. So if in all sincerity we were going to the IMF for only COVID, the deficit in the media review should have increased to 6.5%.
Okay, very well.
Because we have 4.7, sorry, it should have increased to 6.7% because the deficit was supposed to be 4.7. Mm-hmm. If we were doing well and stellar, as the soundbite indicated, then all that we needed to add was 2.5%, which represents the 1 billion, that we got from the fund.
But it was more than that.
And we would have been well off. So the question is, if you add 2 or 2.5, let me even say 3, which is 6.7, 2.3, 2.7, or you are round it up to 5%, and therefore you are at 8%. And your deficit is at 13%. What is accounting for the difference of 7?
That's interesting.
And the answer is in the media review. The media review is an adjustment of the budget. The adjustments that were made were not made on account of COVID. Because remember, by then, we were short of the IMF, 1 billion. There was program for the Central Bank of Ghana to give another 1.7 billion. Mm-hmm. That's what the 10 billion Ghana cedis, US dollars. We are talking about US dollars. So COVID was funded. So if you look at critically at the mid-year review, the items that were increased are what we are talking about today: interest payments, compensation. And then because the budget, the 2020 budget, did not have a provision, mark my word, did not have a provision for bailout costs and for the energy sector costs. I believe in the discussions with the fund, because the fund had made the adjustment, the government of Ghana had to make the adjustment. And it's in the RCF report. The RCF report made the adjustment, and we'll probably have the opportunity to see.
Okay.
So those were the three biggest items.
Okay.
In fact, it was a bailout cost, the energy sector cost, right? The energy sector cost, there was an attempt, if you remember, to put it in, to add it to amortization, which means that you had already accounted for it as arrears, and outside protested. So that's the first major, but that's not the major thing which we want to talk about. We want to look at how did we perform by way of revenue, expenditure, to get to the deficits and the gap situation. What were some of the factors that I'm talking about? And how come, if we were doing so well, as the Deputy Minister said, if you are doing well, you have a low deficit. And that's what we're told, 3.7, 4.5, 4.7, as we just, that was what, which was excellent, except that you borrow to finance the deficit. So if you are doing well, your debt shouldn't be high. We shouldn't be at 80%.
Okay.
Or we shouldn't have been at 63% at the end of 2019, and then 80%. Right, so it was a debt that exposed the difficulty we have there. So we'll find out about revenue, how we are doing, or how we are expenditure, what are the problems, the tax measures.
There's a part that says being where we are.
Why we are where we are, yes.
Yes, that would be very interesting.
Yes. And that gives the reasons. That's the final part as to why is it that we have this. And that has to do with offsets that we were doing. As I said, sometimes not showing bailout costs in the budget at all. Sometimes burying it in footnotes, just to give the impression that, we're doing quite well. And that's the final part. So that's the coverage of, the discussion.
Okay, I'm sure you're also excited listening to the
But I must say it is interactive, because I got this sense from talking to your
Yes, it's definitely going to be interactive. Yes, so right now, Mr. Terkper, if you may take your position by the screen for us so that we start our interactive session. While you're going there, I just want to go through the summary topics. As you mentioned, the three key things we'll be looking, you talked about candidness, and then you raised the question about the rapid credit facility. You also talked about a deficit gap. We'll be discussing that, as well as the 2020 no bailout provision for the energy sector. Those are three interesting things. But from the document that we're going to be interacting on, if I should say, your first part says the COVID-19 excuse. The second part says fiscal framework. We'll look at the third part. That's the overview of the budget 2012-2013 to 2024. The reality of fiscal risk, being where we are, or why we are where we are, and then a conclusion. Yes. So my name is Francisca Kakrafosin. His name is Seth Terkper. We're ready.
Okay, so you've given his highlights already.
Yes.
So we can move on. So this is my point. And I often say that I will be or should be the last person to downplay any crisis. Because I started my career in the mid-1980s, going into early 1990s, and I've seen quite what you mean by crisis as a public servant.
Okay.
We've had droughts affecting our Kosomo Dam, which used to be the only source of power to the country. We've had bushfires, which burned down our cocoa farms, had to be rehabilitated over a period of 3 years with devastating, effects on the economy. Fast forward, we had, and it is that which actually gave rise to some of the debt deficit and debt financing.
Oh, okay.
That gave rise to HIPIC, because these things were occurring in the 80s and 90s. Yeah, that gave rise to HIPIC in the early. Then fast forward, We've had global financial crisis, at least what I experienced as a deputy. We've had global financial crisis. We had a disruption in gas supply from Nigeria, which gave us the name which made its way to Wikipedia, Doomsaw, and falling crude oil prices. We did the budget with $99 in 2015, only for prices to drop to $35.
Yeah.
So I'm not downplaying, crisis at all. When I say that, let's distinguish between the effects of COVID, just as we did with single spine, just as we did with...
Given the history that you've given us to crisis, would you call COVID-19, before you even get into it, would you call it, are you saying it's a crisis or not?
It is. It's the severest crisis, the global crisis that marked, around the world was a Great Depression.
Yeah.
And this is the biggest crisis, global crisis, since the Great Depression. But before this, it was a global financial crisis that was the greatest crisis before. And so the world moves through crisis. And I have a very important towards the end. The reason I'm saying this is that Ghana has to prepare for crisis. They are inevitable. Crisis will always come. And we have had our fair share of crises. We don't have wars, thank God. There are countries that have wars and things, and it takes away all the... So, and that is what the PRMA, that's what the allocation to the stabilization fund in particular, the contingency fund, and some of the funds that is what they are supposed to achieve. So the fact that with 3 oil fields, we did not prepare adequately is one of my points. That maybe we could have managed better. We couldn't have gone to the IMF for $1 billion if we had managed better, but we'll come to that. So yes, preparing for crisis is key. For me, it's a very, very key point. Okay. And which is why, I'll post things like, let's use the Heritage Fund, Stabilization Fund. 2-3 years ago, there was that debate for free SHS, and no. If you have a plan, raise the revenue for it, because they have their purpose. Okay. So let me begin by saying that Ghana has a very effective, or if you like, well-designed fiscal framework. And when you say the fiscal framework, it is how government receives money and how it manages those resources and how it accounts, for that money. We have a very solid fiscal proof. One of the reasons we are where we are is because the current administration attempted to move away from that framework. I spoke about crisis. I spoke about single spine. I spoke about, we can even look at HIPIC. And then other things, because HIPIC came out of crisis. But HIPIC gave us revenue. The divestiture gave us revenue. On the flip side, you have single spine that costs, COVID that costs, right? So you have revenue, sometimes that come as a bonanza. When crude oil prices increase, we have a bonanza, right? So our framework takes care of extraordinary, or what we call exceptional flows into the budget. And it says we must disclose them, but either add or subtract from the deficit. Okay. We saw the phenomenon of a departure where most of these were being treated in footnotes without adherence to articulated 2 of the Public Financial Management Act that says that the Comptroller and Accountant General is the only one, as a government accountant, that can approve this. To my mind, nothing has gone to Parliament in that regard. So
how serious is that?
It's serious. We'll explain it in the sense that if you bury, let's say if you put the bailout cost, despite ESLA covering it, by the way, you include revenue to reduce your deficit, and then the payments for ESLA out of this, for the bailout cost out of ESLA, you exclude it. Right, to further boost your... Now, when you exclude it, and you want to say that the current administration performed better than President Kufuor, as was the debt debate, or President Mahama, or President Rawlings, then you have to do it on equal playing fields. You have to make an adjustment and put their exceptional items also in footnotes. Right? Wow. You follow my point? Yeah. Right. If you put your exceptional items in footnotes, and you say you are doing well, then those who included the exceptional items, you should exclude it so that we can see a better, and that is why you have standards. So, and you are the framework. So if you don't depart from the framework, it allows us to compare one administration to the other, but it also allows us to compare Ghana to other countries, like the IMF and other debts. You can go into their database. When it starts, so the IMF now reporting in Ghana has adopted something called headline deficit, which includes following the government, which we have never had, before. When we get to the tables, you see it. So we have the cash, money coming in, raw cash, money being paid out.
Okay.
But you know that even like a household, you also owe at the end of the month, especially if you are not the type who is rich and you give. And even the rich do planned borrowing, right? They borrow to run their business. They borrow to put up, houses. That's why the banks are there, but they learn to pay. That's another big question, which is why we set up the sinking fund. When you borrow, you must learn to pay. Okay, so the second portion takes care of those arrears. And that is where
I want to ask a question about why you caption it as orchestrated confusion.
Because of the departure, and there's confusion. Isn't there confusion? Because, now what is the measure? Even academics. And some are saying, and they quote the rest rep, for example, saying that government has a discretion. No, really. Not an Article 4 of the fund, because we use the IMF measure. Much of what I have here is in what you call the government finance statistics, right? And countries conform to it, right? So if you continue persistently and you keep taking it out, even though we are where we are, then you can blame it on COVID, right?
Mr. Terkper, is this the first time this observation has been made?
Yes, the first time.
It's the first time.
And I've given examples.
Yes.
The effect of bushfires, the effect of, this is the first time that it is happening.
No, the first time where I'm referring to the footnotes, the departure.
Yes.
Yes.
The first time.
Okay.
We have footnotes. All the footnotes in the past were derived. They were summaries of things, so if you want the tax to GDP ratio for the country, expenditure to GDP ratio, you don't have to be calculating it. So the budget has those footnotes, but the numbers that are used to calculate them are all in the budget. They are all above the line, in the appendix, tables in particular.
Is the assumption that then it's being hidden? Can we make that assumption?
It's not transparent.
Okay, I like that word. It's not transparent. Please carry on.
Okay, so that's why I highlighted this. You see the green. So we start with the deficit, which actually is cash coming in and cash going out.
Okay.
And then you have the fiscal balance, which is the same. So it's an identity. This should be equal to this. One of the things that was done often is that this was never equated. Instead of equating this to this, instead of equating the first line to this, often it's the second line that was equated to the first, which leaves out, the arrears. There was one budget in which that occurred. And then you have this is what we are talking about, the exceptional expenditure. So you can see that you can actually calculate a deficit without the exceptional expenditure, and you can calculate it with the exceptional expenditure. Okay. When you include these exceptional arrears, which is different from the normal arrears, in a footnote, then you are equating this to this. And you are reporting, because the arrears are negative. They are increasing the deficit, right? Wow. So that is the point that, okay. Then when you have your deficit, including arrears and exceptional items, that gives you the amount which you have to borrow. And so the last portion then goes into borrowing. The borrowing that we do from Bank of Ghana, 5% of past revenue according to the PFMA. The borrowing that we do foreign, including the sovereign bond, which they are in London now and other cities trying to sell what we call the roadshow, and the domestic sources, treasury bills, government bonds, which we buy domestically, and then the external sources, the loans that we take from the IMF, the World Bank, the COVID loan and all that, those are all foreign.
Okay.
African Development Bank. And then you get your total borrowing. Wow, okay. You get your total borrowing, right? And then you have the, remember this is your borrowing, which is going to add to your debt stock. So you have to subtract your debt payments to get a net borrowing, which is the one that increases the debt stock. Okay. So you can also call the borrowing short-term, medium-term, long-term, but this classification helps us, follow the. So this is the fiscal table which we have been using, which was streamlined since the ERP sub era, the Economic Recovery Program Structure Adjustment Program era. And therefore, if you pick Ghana's fiscal table from the late 1980s, 1990s, they are comparable. It's only from 2017 as we will see that they are no longer comparable. And this is one of the reasons.
It's from 2017, you say?
2017.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, moving backwards. Okay, so how have we performed? Based on what I've been saying. So you can see that I have the same cash coming in, cash going out, according to the table, right? Just to make the audience follow it.
Yeah, so you're referring to the revenue and the expenditure.
Yeah, this is the cash first part.
Okay.
Then the second, that gives you your deficit.
Okay.
We shall return to this. Why do we have this item appearing in only 2016? You can see that this line.
This is other outstanding expenditure claims. Okay.
You can see that it didn't happen before, and after 2016, it has not happened.
So it's a new introduction.
This is the 7 billion Ghana cedi, arrears that the NVC was supposed to have left behind, which the Auditor General says he disallowed, the Minister says they paid.
Okay.
And which actually was put here because there was an offset, which is one of the reasons we are where we are. And recently in the debate, you would have heard the minority saying that this amount was paid outside the gift mix, through some entities and the rest.
Okay.
Right.
So there's already controversy around this because payment was supposed to have happened, it didn't happen. So I understand. Okay, so you said we'll come back to
the other thing is that we'll come to it. The other thing is that, remember we said this is a cash portion? So what are arrears doing here? Remember, arrears have to be here. So if they were arrears, why are they being shown in the cash portion? Right? And then, so we have so this quickly, these are the actual numbers from 2013. We are not sounding political in choosing 2013. It's because the current GDP measure started, if you remember the rebasing, the current one, we did 3 rebasings. So the current one starts from 2013. We didn't choose it. So we decided that we don't want to be, I don't want to be what we have been contesting. That you cannot say we left a deficit of 9% base, which is based on the old basis, and compare it to your performance on the new basis. So, let's have an equal playing field. Okay. Now, this is in percentage of GDP, the same thing. You see why 2013 is important, because that's the year in which the latest rebasing occurred. Okay, so when you have the GDP, you are using the same. I
think I missed the first one. I only have this one, the percentage of GDP.
Oh.
But that's fine. That's
probably
fine.
They can give you more.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a printout there. I did some of this. Okay, so here we have, again, curiously, you see other outstanding expenditure claims. And again, you see it happened only in 2016.
2016, because everywhere else is zero.
Yes, right? And you can see that all items here have negative. It is only this one which has a positive. So that's another anomaly, which occurred, right? Then we have the arrears, and then the fiscal balance, which we know. So when you talk about the deficit, and this is important, when you talk about the deficit, it is, even though this one has a title deficit, this is not a deficit that's reported. Because if you use this, you are leaving out arrears.
And arrears have to be part of it.
Arrears have to be part of it.
Okay.
It is like somebody asking you, how much do you owe? Oh, right? And then you pick, even though this is similar. I had a salary of 15.7, right? Let's say Ghana cedis. Let's change this to household numbers. And then I said my expenditure is 20.2. And then I'm asked, So how much, what is your indebtedness? And he says, oh, my indebtedness is 6.5. I spent 22, right, more than my salary. But you are living at the fact that you have gone for a salary advance, which is in arrears. You are living at the fact that, you know, there are some notorious, you know, households, you've taken some money from, you know, the wife's working, working capital, you know, which is becoming an issue at home. You are borrowed from friends and all that. So if you leave out this,
we don't get the full picture.
Yes, you are using the narrow basis.
Okay.
You may have heard, you know, we use the word broad and narrow in different contexts. The Bank of Ghana governor used one. Remember, he entreated government to move back to the broad basis of calculating the deficit, which should include the things that are below the line. So you have the arrears, and then you add your exceptional items. So here you will see that the exceptional items here up to 2016 includes exceptional items. In line with what we said earlier, from 2017 they exclude. And we'll come to that, you know, as well.
Okay.
Okay, so these were the deficits that were reported: 7.6, 7.4, 4.9, 6.1. And this is interesting. You will see that from the government's own statistics, you know, we downloaded this from the Ministry of Finance website. Okay. The 2016 deficit is 6.1. Yes. But we have been told that the deficit is, sometimes they say 10.3, sometimes 9.3, sometimes it's, you know, yes, right? It is because of these offsets, which we're talking about. Right.
That's the 2.3?
The first one we saw.
Okay.
In numbers, the 5 billion.
Okay.
And its GDP equivalent is the 2.3.
Okay.
Right. So you can see that the 2.3, because...
Was it 7 billion or 5 billion?
5 billion.
5 billion, okay.
Yeah, it was supposed to be 7, right? Then the 5 was offset. You know, the increase was 7, right? And then if you offset 5, then what you're actually carrying forward is 2. 2. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but you see that the effect is to reduce it, but they keep talking about NDC leaving a deficit, you know, which is a higher deficit here, which is often quoted as 8.3, depending on, you know, what you are, yes. Right? And they are comparing this 8.3 actually to their deficits, which is lower here, which also excludes the exceptional, you know, items.
Okay.
So this is a graph of how we are performing. And this is my point. You see the 2017 performance, which was supposed to be very excellent, right? All of a sudden in 2020, you see this is a deficit. So deficit is going down. So you see it has gone.
It's a big drop.
Yes, it's a big drop. And that's the 11-13%, which I was talking about, which visually you can see. And so we are supposed to be, and this table, unlike the other one, because I didn't want to be congested, includes the MTEF. So we are supposed to be reducing this level of deficit now to this level. Okay. Yes. By 2024.
So those are targets?
Those are targets. Those are MTEF. Those are targets.
Realistic?
I took this from the mid-year review. I have not updated them yet.
Okay.
With the, yes. But these are our targets. It tells you the targets where we want to be.
Are they realistic? Achievable?
It will require a lot of hard work.
Okay.
Yeah, because at 13% or 11% is the steepest, you know, that we have had, you know. And this is the point I'm making about distinguishing the COVID from, you know, non-COVID, so that we know really what the performance was. Yes. So, if you are just, remember, all that we have done excludes bailout, because it's not included in arrears. It's shown. If you are just for the bailout, this is the balances that we had in real numbers from the previous tables. And so we bring them down. You can remember this, 7.6, 7.4. The last one, if you go to the previous slide, you see them as the fiscal balance. Okay. Now, you remember what we said about the performance here being very impressive until it changed to 11.4. Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you add the bailout cost, 2017 there was no provision for bailout costs, even though we had ESLA, which should have been used to be making a payment. Similarly, 2020, there was no provision for bailout costs. Yeah. And therefore it was adjusted in a media review. That had nothing to do with COVID. It was just omitted and adjusted, you know, together with the increase in compensation and others. So if you add it, then you can see that the deficit, this one from 2017 changes, it remains because the bailout cost was left out.
Yeah.
But this one increases from 3.9 to 7.2. It increases to 5.8 to 4.7, which were further adjusted, so, and even the IMF also adjusted many of these back to, 7%. So the question then is, and this is a candidness, what is Ghana's deficit? Is it this line or it is this line? And if you say it is this line, then I'm saying go back to previous administrations and use their line to do the comparison.
Harmony.
Because they have had harmony, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. So you can see these bars we have here are the bailout costs. And you can see that they vary. Because there was no provision in 2017, you can see that there was a big provision that was made in 2018. And you can see as a result, this is without the bailout cost, the blue line, right?
Okay.
And then after the bailout cost, you can see the deficit drops. And then after the 2020 adjustments, because there was no provision in the 2020 budget, for bailout costs and the rest, you see the deficit goes down again, right? Okay. And then we are supposed to climb. This is the part we're supposed to be climbing to come back to normality, because you see this is 4%,
yeah.
And you see this is 6%, and the Budget Responsibility Act is what, 5%?
Yeah.
If you recall, there is 5%. So,
can he get some help? Yes. Okay. Mr. Terkper is showing us that he's tech savvy. That's nice.
Okay. So I think we went
So I think
past.
you just go forward a bit. Yeah, a few pages. Yes, here.
Okay. So as a result of the correction, so this is the contention. Is all this drop in the deficit on account of COVID, or it's also on account of this, where there was no provision in 2020? As you can see, I hope I'm not covering your viewers, 2020, and you introduce it, the bailout, and it increases the deficit. Yeah. This is the point we are making. And this is the point they say, is belittling COVID. No. Right?
Mr. Terkper, I've just been alerted we have 15 minutes more. Okay, so maybe that will guide your presentation as we're moving forward.
Okay, so these adjustments were made. Actually, we can move forward. I hope that. And then we add the adjustments that were made by the IMF. And you can see that they are higher. Okay, so the IMF subsequently made also the adjustments, which are different. So the government position is very optimistic at this level. And you can see that the IMF adjustment during excluding is even high, and then including, is even much higher. So in other words, those who are arguing for, shows, this is just the same. You can see the drops based on the development. Okay. So how are we performing? So in terms of the taxes, this is the revenue performance. The point I want to make here is that you see the way the taxes are all over the place, right? Which of the taxes is supposed to be stable to bring us, revenue so that we can build on it, right? And there are 4 of them. Among all there are other lines which I have left out. Okay. But there are 4 of them. Your VAT, your excise, your corporate income tax, and your import duty. Okay. So when we do things like benchmark, when we do things like VAT flat rate scheme, when we remove NHIL and get fund from the VAT base, and we stop the refund and credit, to businesses, when we introduce another element of ESLA, which we have not presented here, which in actual fact should be part of excise, and you disturb, and this one GRA cannot do anything about it because it's policy. But you give an opportunity also for tax evasion and avoidance. And those who even want to comply have a tough time, where previously they are accounting for only 1 VAT, Now they are accounting for VAT, they are accounting for Get Fund, NHIL, and now a special NHIL, right? Mind you, there was a consumption, communication service tax which should have been part of the VAT and all that. So you introduce, and as a result you see, so you can see, if you compare, this is a VAT which was performing well, then it started dipping.
The VAT is the red line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we resort to increasing personal income tax and corporate income taxes and the rest, and it crosses blue, and it's part of the major, line. So here, this is about stability of our tax regime. The countries that do well leave their tax, handles, well. So these are things which we will try and refine this, and make it, available in some of our publications. Okay. So if you take VAT, what's in the name? All of these are basically VAT. And what we are doing is that we are going back to 1993 before we started thinking about changing all those numerous taxes and having only one VAT regime to make it easy for business to comply with. So we become conversant with only one methodology. Now we have introduced all this, and it increases compliance, as we say in the listing. So that is the thing about it. And then some of them are duplicating, right? So you have, I said when I was sitting, the other big thing I like to say is that often we talk about all the payments we have made, for bank bailout costs and all the burden that, it has brought, and increasing the debt stock by the ESLA bond. The fact is, ESLA is cash. ESLA has brought in 21 billion Ghana cedis cash already, and ESLA is supposed to bring in 41 billion, cash by 2024. So where did the cash go? How come we are not paying directly and we are putting everything on debt? Candidness. If the money was used for other purposes and the rest, we might as well just, let the public know. Yeah. So let me move quickly. Expenditure follows the same.
Expenditure performance.
I think the two big issues there is the share of compensation and interest payment. Now, this rendition, this is your tax revenue line. Everything above it is not covered by taxes, it's covered by borrowing. Okay. Right? So that is the situation that faces us. So the more your interest payment and compensation increases, the more you push the others.
And 2016 is the highest.
Exactly. Is the highest. No, this is the total expenditure. Yes, this one includes a controversial offsets, you remember, and all the, yes. And by the way, if the reduction occurred, if the reduction from 8 to 6.1 occurred in 2016, then who takes the credit? Who was in charge in 2016? You see the awkwardness, and that is why, they move from 6.1 and say the deficit was 8.3. Okay. Right. Because then it would have become clear, who the credit goes. This is what I wanted. So you see this blue line is compensation. And then this orange line is interest. This is what we've been debating. They have always been below, and they have been high in the past. Because you have single spine and others. But this is the first time the two have crossed the revenue line. And therefore, it means that this difference shows that we are borrowing to even pay these two items. Wow. Where previously they were covered, domestically, right? And that one was tax revenue, this is total revenue. So when you see the 98 or something that's been, referred to, this is it. It's very close, even though overall revenue. But overall revenue includes allocations to Get Fund, to, all those things. So you actually, if you remove all of those, the line comes down like so this is the situation that we have. Okay. So the major reasons that we have are that one. This translates into the debt, right? The debt situation that we have. And again, you come to the same thing that we're doing, excluding the bailout costs. Okay. So you see the consistency in what is happening. So again, we translate in GDP terms, and it appears the graph is, visually, but again, like the borrowing, you can see, because the borrowing is from external and from domestic sources, it is reflected in the debt, as well. And then you can see, because it was excluded, bailout costs and whatever, the IMF, this government of Ghana, IMF, they make the adjustments, which, because they had adjusted the deficit, so remember we said the deficit is what you finance. So they also have adjusted, this one. And so this is the path. Here you can see this is total. It's going up. But when you come here, this is the interesting line. After we started paying from our oil revenue, sinking fund and the rest, the rate at which we were borrowing, those new smart borrowing things were brought in 2013, 2014. You see, the rate at which we are borrowing started to go down.
From 2014 to 15, okay.
And then they were halted. In many cases, the sinking fund was not being utilized. GIF never had any allocation. And so you see, it starts going up. And you can see in the total from the previous one that even though the total is going up, you can see that it was flattening here. And there's a slight decline here. So if you don't pay more than you are borrowing, you end up with this situation. And initially, the green is hidden here because the computation. The green is hidden there because the computation didn't make a difference. When the computation made a difference, it was you had to show them separately. Okay. So those are the public debt issues. Again, transparency in how we calculate it, right? Another point about the the debt, is that are we at 80%? We go back and look at BOG. BOG reported a debt figure in November, right? November last year, which is even higher than the December one the Ministry of Finance, is in the budget.
The 76.1%.
Yes. Yeah. No, but that was in November. Sorry, no, but they had a bailout cost. I'm talking about a bailout cost.
Okay.
They had also a bailout cost that was higher in November, but which is lower. And that's the basis on which we say that our debt is actually 80%. Because if you take that, but that can be resolved. I mean, once the government brings clarity to the issue, then we can all go back and use the correct figures.
Okay.
Or we wait for the IMF. Okay. So, why are we where we are?
Yes.
The first one is this item, which was, you remember this offset that was made? We are back to the 5 billion, right?
Yeah.
In the cash portion, even though it shouldn't be there, then you come to the arrears portion. And if you add this 4292 to 743, I don't know if you can do a quick addition.
Okay, let me get my calculator on.
That's 4292.3 plus 743.3.
Okay. 4292. 4292.3
plus 743.3.
743.3. That gives 5,035.6.
You remember that figure?
Yeah.
So this is when you say there's an offset, there must be a second one. Yeah, it's only broken into two. And then you remember what I said? All the items are negative. Those are the ones which are positive, which shows that this is a deficit. This you see, it's in brackets, so it's deficit. It's negative.
Negative, yeah.
So for this to increase, this has to be negative. So once they are in positive, they reduce it. So you see, it reduced the fiscal balance from 12 to 16 to 11, and then to 9, right?
Okay.
And it follows through, and this is a reduction. If you use the old basis, this is a 10.3 deficit that they said we left. And that's the very first, deficit line. Remember what I said? That we use the third line, the first one. So this is what is being quoted. Why? Because even back then, if you quote this one, it means that, the administration would have done, and this is the old GDP basis. If you take out the offset, the deficit is 5.6, or 6.7, and then 4.4. Okay. So this is the true performance in 2016, which has always been said to be 10.3, and creating the confusion around the 5 billion whether. So that is one of the reasons why we are where we are, because it's being paid outside. The Auditor General said he has disallowed it. It's been, a matter of controversy. The other reason is the footnotes, which we discussed, already. Then there's a third reason, which I gave already. We ourselves reported, that we need so much for COVID, and there was a gap already in that report, right? And it's here. So there are these gaps, financing gap. Those of viewers who are technically inclined can go to the RCF report, the one the Deputy Minister referred to, and they can see this table. But they have to make corrections because the sub-items don't add up. When they add up, you have a huge fiscal gap of about 6%, which accounts for the adjustments that were made. And it's on account of interest payments, bailout costs which were left out, compensation, and then the energy costs. And those are in the appendices again, in the. So the conclusion for us is that until we come to terms with this, we'll be actually missing a very great opportunity in attempting to put everything on COVID because the real cost. And so you can see that most of the cost increases, like the NHIL levy, like the ESLA levy and the rest, the reasons being given are to tackle the very things that we are talking about.
But just before you move on to the way forward, do we get the impression that the government really puts everything on COVID? They told us they spent, about 19 billion?
No. Well, you can see the deficit is much higher than, 19 billion spread. And it's actually, there's revenue that's going to be coming that is also spread all the way to 2023, right? So if you annualize them, then you don't. Yes, there was a lot that was spent in 2020, and a lot will be spent on account of the vaccine. By the way, I've taken my vaccine. Let me appeal to, the viewers to go and take theirs. So, but it will taper off, hopefully, if the vaccine works, and then the economy will pick up. And then, but if the economy picks up, again, let us prepare for the next crisis. That's my conclusion. Okay. We have had 3 oil fields. We should have prepared better for this crisis. It doesn't matter whether it's the severest. Prepare for mild crisis, prepare for severe crisis, prepare for extraordinary ones. Whether it's Ebola, SARS, bushfires, or whatever, fall in commodity prices, we should remain faithful, And then this whole issue of, and I made this call before, and I mean it sincerely, whether I can put something in a footnote or not, it's accounting. Okay. And the Institute of Chartered Accountants, should just come up with a standard called IPSAS, so that everybody, it's introduced a level playing field. Your studio applies IFRS because it's private sector. That's the IPSAS is the public sector equivalent. Your accounting financial statement can be compared to TV3, can be compared to GBC. GBC is public anyway, non-profit, right? Because there's a standard which the institute has issued. So the institute should just give government and non-profit organizations a standard, which is called the IPSAS, International Public Sector Accounting Standard, so that we can, this call was made in 2015, right? So basically that is where...
You've gone through the way forward, everything?
Yes, the conclusion should have been.
Okay.
Yes. So the way forward is the conclusion. And then we should remove those items, we should remain faithful to the PRMA and prepare for the next crisis because crises are inevitable, they will definitely come. And then let us have a uniform way of calculating so that, we are not told, this is so much. In fact, it was when the IMF did their correction that the expression parallel reporting came in. And it came in because at the time that the IMF board was approving the adjustments, it was November 2019. Parliament was discussing a lower deficit the aspiring numbers, in the House.
Okay.
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
Terkper, I want to ask, thank you for the presentation / interaction. I want to ask a flip side question. So what is good about the budget? Maybe in wrapping up our conversation.
Oh, I think that Ghana has been acknowledged for its response to the COVID. We shouldn't take anything away, but it's a fiscal situation that is making it difficult for us to even progress all this debate about, whether we are going to pay for the water from the levies and from all those, it's quite unfortunate. But those go, in my view, to the problems that persisted earlier. Okay. Right? So the preparation for COVID, because we are in COVID and we have to prepare for it, proudly so also including the $250 million that was taken from the stabilization fund. I hope that next time we have a crisis, we can be able to take 500 million. You remember we took from the sinking fund 550 million of our own oil revenue to redeem the bulk. The amount was $750 million. We paid 550 of the first sovereign bond. That is how, and that's how come that graph, the declining started. So oil revenue is new to the budget, it's still new. If we push it into consumption, one day we will be blamed like they blame countries, including neighboring countries, for using their oil revenue for consumption.
Okay.
So if we have expenditure pressures, let's have the debate. Let's have a discussion. It's like we had a whole forum on single spine. It wasn't because we were anti-labor, even though it was presented as such, but we all agreed, based on the payment of the arrears, a calculation that went wrong, that, we'll have COLA, and then we'll have a lower, increase, and then, we can revert to doing things.
Key thing is let's have the debate. And that's the former Finance Minister, Seth Terkper. We're grateful and honored to have been part of his presentation. This has been Good Afternoon, Ghana, with me, Francisca Kakra-Forson. Thank you very much.